I used to plan to get revenge on my boyfriend after I found out he was cheating. Here's how I exposed him. If you enjoy listening to crazy things that happen to people, but in story format, then hit that subscribe button, and let's get to it. Sophia had always considered herself a patient woman. Her job as a marketing assistant at a mid-sized tech company was one she enjoyed, with enough challenges to keep her engaged, but not so overwhelming that she felt consumed by it. She had built a solid reputation over the years, reliable, steady, diligent, and was well-liked by her coworkers. Her life, on the surface, seemed perfect. She had a steady career, a loving boyfriend, and everything was moving along as planned. Her relationship with Mark had always felt like a partnership. They had been together for 3 years of dinners, weekend getaways, and quiet nights at home, just enjoying each other's company. She trusted him completely, and he trusted her. At least, that's what she thought. Things had been going smoothly until a small, seemingly insignificant change happened at work. It all started with a new intern, Emily, who was assigned to the marketing department. Emily was young, eager, and full of energy, which made her immediately popular among the team. Sophia had no reason to doubt her. After all, Emily was just another intern. But something about her began to bug Sophia. Perhaps it was the way Emily and Mark seemed to bond over work-related tasks. Or maybe it was the way Mark's smile brightened whenever Emily walked into the room. Sophia wasn't the jealous type, but she began to feel a slight unease whenever the two of them were together. She brushed it off at first. It was nothing, she told herself. He was just being friendly. But the more she observed, the more the feeling grew. There were too many moments where Mark seemed to go out of his way to assist Emily with tasks, or when Emily would laugh a little too much at his jokes. Sophia could tell that Mark was distracted more often than usual, and it wasn't just with work. The way he looked at her during their conversations had changed. It was subtle, but it was there. One afternoon, Sophia decided to do something she had never done before. She went through Mark's phone. He had always been open about his passwords and had never hidden anything. So when he left his phone on the kitchen counter, she saw it as an opportunity to find out if her suspicions had any basis. She didn't expect to find anything major. Maybe just a few late-night work-related texts or a funny meme he had sent to a coworker. But what she found stopped her heart. The text messages were from Emily. At first, they seemed harmless enough, just casual conversations about work, but as she scrolled deeper, things started to change. The tone of their messages became more flirtatious. There were inside jokes, winks, and playful banter. It was the kind of thing you would expect between two people who were more than just coworkers. And then, she found it. One message from Emily read, "I can't wait to see you tonight. I miss our time together." Sophia's hands began to shake. The words felt like a punch to her stomach. It couldn't be real. She thought it had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe Mark was just being friendly, as she had always believed. But the longer she looked at the messages, the more it became clear that something was happening between them. Something that went beyond work. She felt betrayed, not by Emily, but by Mark. This wasn't just a little flirtation. This was an emotional connection. She couldn't fathom how this had been going on under her nose. How had she been so blind? She didn't know what to do. Confronting him immediately felt like the obvious choice, but something inside her told her to wait. She needed to think, to plan. If he was cheating on her, if he had crossed that line, she wasn't going to let it go without making him understand the gravity of his actions. But she also knew she couldn't confront him blindly. She needed more evidence. She needed to be sure. The next few days were the hardest of Sophia's life. She kept her cool at work, pretending everything was fine. But every time Mark looked at her, she felt her heart tighten. He had no idea that she knew the truth. She began to pay closer attention to his behavior, trying to catch him in a lie. She would glance at him when he spoke to Emily, noticing the way his eyes lingered just a little longer than usual. The touch of her shoulder as they passed by each other, the quiet conversations they shared when they thought no one was looking. It all seemed so innocent on the surface, but Sophia knew better now. Sophia had been patient. She had always trusted Mark, but now she realized that trust was a fragile thing. She wasn't going to let him destroy her confidence or her life just because he had betrayed her. No, she was going to do something about it. Sophia's mind raced as she pondered what to do next. Confronting Mark immediately felt like the obvious choice, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized it wouldn't solve anything. If she approached him directly, she would be giving him the opportunity to lie, to deny, and to turn the tables on her. She wasn't going to give him that power. No, she had to be smarter than that. This wasn't just about catching him in the act. It was about making sure he would feel the weight of his betrayal. She needed a plan, one that would hit him where it hurt the most, without him realizing she was setting him up. The idea came to her one quiet evening, as she sat in her living room, staring at the plant she had recently bought for her office. It had become a symbol of her quiet contentment at work, an innocent addition to her desk to brighten her days. The idea was simple. If she could expose his actions subtly, with evidence that he couldn't deny, she would strip him of his ability to lie. She needed to involve something that would make him uncomfortable, something that he would never suspect. The office plant, a beautiful fern she named Fernie, was the perfect tool. It had started out as an innocent gift to herself, a way to add a bit of nature to her sterile, corporate environment. But now, the plant became her weapon. She had noticed that Mark had been particularly fond of it. Every time he passed her desk, he would stop and gently adjust the leaves or comment on how healthy it looked. He would say, "You've got a real green thumb, huh?" as if it were just a friendly conversation starter. He never paid much attention to the plant beyond that. But what he didn't realize was that Sophia was paying attention to him. Every time he touched the plant, it was like a small signal that went unnoticed by everyone else, but was meaningful to her. Her plan was simple. She would make small, almost undetectable changes to the plant each day, subtle enough that Mark wouldn't notice at first, but eventually noticeable enough that it would get under his skin. She would alter the plant's appearance, little by little, and use that as a way to mess with his head, creating tension between them without him realizing it was her doing it. But this wasn't just about messing with him. It was also about setting the stage for the confrontation she would eventually have with him. The first step in her plan was to carefully remove a few leaves from the plant, just enough that the plant would start looking a little sparse. She had to be subtle. She didn't want him to notice immediately. Over the course of the next week, she would borrow a few more leaves. Every time he would come to her desk and run his fingers over Fernie, it would look a little different. The leaves would be fewer, the plant would seem less lush, but still, he wouldn't be able to place exactly what was wrong. Sophia felt a strange sense of satisfaction as she watched Fernie lose its vibrancy. She knew it was a small detail, but it was a start. She was setting the groundwork for the bigger picture, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a sense of control. But there was more to her plan. She needed more than just subtle manipulation of the plant. She needed a way to make him feel guilty, to make him confront the truth without her having to say a word. She knew that if she confronted him directly about the affair, he could lie and try to turn the tables. He could say that it was nothing more than a silly office flirtation. But what if she could plant the seeds of doubt in his mind without ever saying a word? The next step involved an anonymous text. One evening, after she had removed another leaf from Fernie, she composed a message to Mark's phone. It read, "I can't help but feel like I've been losing bits of myself lately. It's like everything's falling apart. Is it me? Or maybe it's Fernie." The idea was to make Mark feel uneasy, to plant the idea that something was wrong, but without giving him an obvious explanation. She wanted him to be unsettled, to question his own actions. The text didn't make sense on the surface, but it would be enough to make him start thinking. Maybe he would wonder if she had noticed something, if he was being too obvious with his behavior. Sophia wasn't sure what he would think, but she knew it was enough to create the first crack in his composure. The next day, she sent the text. She watched him from across the room as his phone buzzed, and his face fell as he read the message. He looked confused at first, then quickly glanced toward her desk. She could see the wheels turning in his mind. He didn't respond immediately, which told her he was trying to figure out what was going on. It was exactly the reaction she had hoped for. For the next few days, she continued with the plant. She made small changes, moving it slightly on the desk, adjusting its leaves just enough to make it look off. Every time Mark stopped by, he would comment on the plant again. He would smile awkwardly, running his fingers over the sparse leaves, clearly wondering what was happening. But he never asked. He just accepted the oddity of the situation without addressing it. But what really made her plan work was the change she saw in him. Mark became increasingly distracted at work, and his usual confidence began to wane. He seemed on edge, and his interactions with Sophia grew more strained. She could tell that he was starting to feel the pressure. The small details were starting to get to him, and she hadn't even had to confront him yet. Sophia's plan was starting to take root, and she felt a sense of quiet satisfaction every time she watched Mark at his desk, distracted and slightly unnerved. It wasn't the type of satisfaction that came from revenge in the traditional sense. There were no dramatic confrontations, no shouting matches. Instead, it was the slow and steady feeling of taking control of a situation that had once seemed so out of her hands. Mark had no idea what was coming, and Sophia was enjoying the suspense. It was subtle, like a slow tide creeping toward the shore. She had seen him touch the plant more than once now, his fingers tracing the bare stems, his face twisting in confusion. He started mentioning it to her more often, his voice a little more strained each time. "I don't know what's going on with Fernie," he said one afternoon. "It looked fine when you first got it. Now it's just not the same." Sophia smiled to herself. She could hear the uncertainty in his voice, but she simply nodded. "Maybe it needs more sunlight," she suggested casually, leaning back in her chair. Sometimes plants just change. They don't always stay the same, you know. It was a simple enough reply, but it made Mark pause. She saw the flicker of guilt in his eyes, but he quickly masked it with a nonchalant grin. He scratched his head awkwardly and walked away, leaving Sophia to herself. The more he interacted with Fernie, the more it seemed to weigh on him. The plant, which had started as a harmless addition to her office, was now the symbol of his unease. It became a constant reminder of the changes happening around him. Changes he couldn't quite explain, but knew he was responsible for. Sophia's confidence grew every time she saw that look of confusion on Mark's face. But she wasn't done yet. There was still more to do, more layers to peel back. If she wanted to truly expose him, she needed to push him further, make him squirm just a little bit more. The next phase of her plan involved a more direct approach, an anonymous email. She didn't want to just keep sending vague texts about Fernie. She wanted to make him feel the full weight of his actions. Sophia crafted a carefully worded email that, while not explicitly accusing him, would still plant a seed of doubt in his mind. It read, "I noticed that the small things have been changing lately. Like, when you're at the office, there's this shift in energy. It's subtle, but I can't help but feel that something is going on. Is everything okay with you?" She sent it from a disposable email address, making sure it couldn't be traced back to her. Her goal was to make Mark paranoid, to make him feel as though someone had noticed the changes in his behavior and was watching him. She didn't care if he figured out who it was. It was more important that he felt uncomfortable. She knew that once he read it, the pressure would mount. It would be one more thing on his mind, one more thing that would add to the slowly building weight of his guilt. The following morning, Mark came into work looking different. He wasn't his usual confident self. He seemed frazzled, glancing around the office with an air of suspicion. He had received the email. Sophia noticed it immediately. As soon as he sat down at his desk, he opened his inbox and stared at the screen, reading the message over and over again. His face grew pale, and his lips pressed together in frustration. Sophia couldn't help but watch from the corner of her eye, a small thrill running through her at the sight of his discomfort. As the day went on, Mark became more withdrawn. He kept his distance, avoiding eye contact with her and others in the office. His usual charm and warmth were gone, replaced by a cold, tense version of himself. It was almost as if the walls he had carefully built around himself were beginning to crumble. But the most telling moment came when Emily walked into the office. Sophia had seen the way the two of them interacted before, the way Mark's eyes would soften when she was around, the way they would exchange private jokes. But today was different. Mark barely acknowledged Emily as she entered, his gaze darting nervously from his computer screen to the door. Emily noticed the change immediately. She tried to make a joke, as she always did, but Mark didn't respond. He seemed more interested in his phone than in anything she had to say. Sophia watched all of this from the corner of the room. She had set the pieces in motion, and now it was starting to play out just as she had hoped. Mark was unraveling, piece by piece. The small changes, the emails, the texts, the plant, had all combined to create an environment of suspicion and guilt. Sophia had made him uncomfortable, and now he was beginning to feel the weight of his own actions. But she wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Over the next few days, she continued to watch Mark, noting every little shift in his behavior. She could tell that he was on edge, and she wasn't about to let him off the hook. She knew that his guilt would eventually spill over, and when it did, she would be ready. One morning, Sophia received a phone call from Mark. It was the first time he had reached out to her since the whole situation had started. She could hear the uncertainty in his voice as he tried to play it cool. "Hey, I was wondering if we could talk," he said. "There's something I've been meaning to discuss, and I think we need to clear the air." Sophia's heart raced. She knew this moment was coming, but she wasn't sure how she would respond. Would she give him the satisfaction of an explanation? Or would she let him continue spiraling, trapped in the web she had carefully woven around him? "I think we need to talk too," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But not right now. I'm busy. Maybe later." Sophia hung up the phone, her pulse still racing. She knew the next move had to be perfect. She wasn't just going to end this with a conversation. She needed to make sure Mark knew exactly how his actions had affected her. She wasn't just going to let him walk away with a simple apology. The days following Mark's call were filled with a strange tension. Sophia could feel it in the air every time she saw him. There was an undeniable change in the way he moved, the way he interacted with the people around him. The usual confidence he had in the office was gone. Every time he passed by her desk, she could see his eyes flicker to the plant, Fernie, which had now lost so many leaves that it resembled a nearly dead version of its former self. Sophia was almost amused by how much he had let himself become entangled in the small, subtle changes she had made. The plant had become a symbol of everything that was unraveling in his life. Every glance at it seemed to remind him of the creeping discomfort he couldn't shake. She could tell that he was more aware of the small things, the emails, the texts, the quiet ways she had made him doubt himself. But it wasn't enough yet. She hadn't quite finished the game. Mark had been trying to reach out to her, attempting to fix things with a vague sense of urgency, but Sophia wasn't ready to allow him that ease. She had orchestrated this carefully, and she wasn't going to let him escape with a simple apology. It had to be more. He had to see exactly how much his betrayal had affected her. That afternoon, Mark came to her desk again, his face tense and unreadable. He had been avoiding her for days, but now he seemed almost desperate. "Sophia," he began, his voice quiet, "I need to talk to you. I know things have been strange between us, but I think we need to have a conversation. It's important." Sophia didn't respond immediately. She simply watched him, the way his hands fidgeted, the way his eyes darted nervously between her and the plant. The guilt was practically oozing from him now, and she couldn't help but feel a small, cold satisfaction. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "I've been thinking," Mark continued, trying to sound confident, but his voice wavered slightly. "I think I've messed up. I know I've made some mistakes, but I don't want this to end like this. Please, let's just talk about it." Sophia leaned back in her chair, her fingers tracing the edge of the desk as she slowly looked at him. She hadn't said a word yet, and Mark was starting to feel the pressure. He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "So, you want to talk about it now?" she asked, her voice calm and even. There was a small pause before she continued. "You want to talk about Emily?" Mark's face went pale. For a moment, he looked like a deer caught in the headlights. He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. Instead, he just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. Sophia could feel the power in the moment. He was caught. There was no denying it anymore. She had stripped away every defense he had, and now he had nowhere to hide. "I saw the texts, Mark," she said softly, letting the words sink in. "I saw everything. The way you talked to her. The way you—" She paused, making sure he felt the weight of every word. "Lied to me." Mark's eyes widened, and he took a step back, looking panicked. "Sophia, please." "No, Mark," she cut him off, her voice firm. "Don't try to explain it. You don't get to do that anymore. You've been lying to me, and you didn't even have the decency to admit it when I confronted you about it. But you couldn't keep your lies up forever, could you?" Mark opened his mouth again, but this time, he was struggling to form the words. He looked like he was about to break down, but Sophia wasn't finished yet. This was the moment of reckoning, the moment when he would understand the full extent of the damage he had done. Sophia stood up from her desk, slowly walking toward him, her eyes locked onto his. "I gave you everything, Mark. I trusted you. I supported you. But you? You couldn't keep your hands to yourself, could you?" Mark's head dropped, and he looked away, guilt flooding his features. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I messed up. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Sophia shook her head, the hurt and anger boiling inside her. "No, Mark. You didn't mess up. You made a choice. And that choice was to betray me. You chose to hurt me. And now, you're going to deal with the consequences." She paused, letting her words hang in the air between them. She could see his shoulders slump, his once proud posture deflating as he realized that he couldn't talk his way out of this. He wasn't in control anymore. "I know I've hurt you," Mark said, his voice breaking. "I regret it. I really do. I don't know what happened. It was a mistake, and I'm so sorry." Sophia's expression softened, but only slightly. "Sorry doesn't cut it anymore, Mark. It's too late for apologies." She turned toward the desk, where the plant stood, still with its sparse, thinning leaves. It had become an emblem of everything that had gone wrong. "Do you remember Fernie, Mark?" she asked, her voice almost casual. "Do you remember how it looked when you first saw it? Healthy, vibrant, full of life." Mark followed her gaze to the plant. He nodded slowly, a small, almost sad smile tugging at his lips. "Yeah, it looked great. I always liked it." Sophia turned back to him, her eyes cold. "It used to be full of life, just like us. But you killed it, Mark. You let it wither away." She paused, letting him absorb her words. "Just like you let our relationship wither away. You let it die. And now, there's nothing left." Mark stood there in silence, unable to respond. The weight of her words hit him hard, and he finally realized the full extent of what he had done. It wasn't just about a few flirty texts or a moment of weakness. It was about breaking someone's trust and allowing the damage to fester without ever admitting it. Sophia took a deep breath, her chest tightening. She had done it. She had taken him down, piece by piece, without him ever realizing what was happening. The subtle manipulation, the anonymous texts, the plant, it had all come together to this moment. "I'm done," she said simply, her voice steady. "This is over, Mark. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I won't be part of that anymore." Mark stared at her, defeated, But Sophia didn't care. She had won. She had exposed him for who he really was, and now it was over. There was nothing left for her to give, and she wasn't about to waste any more time on someone who didn't deserve her. Sophia turned and walked away from him, leaving him standing there, his heart heavy with regret. She had gotten her revenge, not in a dramatic outburst or a public confrontation, but in a quiet, calculated unraveling that had left him with nothing but the guilt he had earned.